You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Lower Decks, Parth Ferengi's Heart Place. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have more of your wonderful listener feedback that we love to get and to discuss. Remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter at SQPN and leave us comments wherever you find us. So again, more feedback for us to share. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network you are certain to enjoy called The Secrets of Technology. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology. So, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in Parth Ferengi's Heart Place?
This week, the mystery ship destroys a Ferengi vessel, and it seems that one of the Ferengi lower deckers may have been in league with it. Meanwhile, the Cerritos has gone to Ferenginar to sign a deal that could lead to the Ferengi joining the Federation, so we get an episode focused on Grand Nagus Rom and First Clerk Leeta. Also, our lower deckers are assigned to update Starfleet's files in a Ferenginar travel guide for officers who may visit the planet in the future. Boimler plans to visit and review an impossible number of locations, but gets sidetracked and watches 8 hours of Ferengi TV instead. Mariner goes to meet her friend Quimp, who we've met before, and she gets outrageously drunk and starts a fight with Ferengi bikers. This forces Quimp to bribe her out of jail, and he doesn't know why she's still rebelling when everything is going so good for her. Rutherford and Tendi are assigned to impersonate a married couple, and they're given a deluxe newlyweds discount package on the planet. And it turns out that if you fake a relationship to get this discount package, you're sentenced to life in the underwater sulfur mines. So they really have to fake it no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Eventually, Dr. Miglimo shows up and almost blows their cover, but they turn the tables by portraying him as a homewrecker and announce that they're getting a divorce so they can go back to the ship. Meanwhile, Captain Freeman becomes increasingly frustrated with the Admiral who's overseeing the Ferengi signing. It's obvious to her that Rom and Leeta are running a scam on him, but he's oblivious to it. Eventually, Captain Freeman announces that she's accepted all of the Ferengi contract amendments, which will put the Federation in debt to Ferenginar forever. But she's also added one provision, that the Ferengi have to get another planet to join also for those provisions to go into effect. Rom immediately agrees and signs, thinking that it will be easy to get a planet in debt to the Ferengi to join the Federation. And then Captain Freeman reveals that he didn't read the fine print, also known as the Ferengi print. There's a specific planet they have to get to agree to join the Federation, not just any planet. It's the Klingon homeworld, which will be an impossible task. Rom is delighted that she swindled him, as this shows they respect Ferengi culture. He then agrees to sign the unmodified contract without all the crazy amendments. The end.
So, overall impressions, Father Cory.
I enjoyed this. Of course, it's fun to see the Ferengi, especially with the development that happened through DS9 and, kind of continuing with that, because they can do so much silly, ridiculous things, just poking at the excesses of capitalism and just ridiculousness in general. Rom and Leeta was awesome. Max Gronachek and Chase Masterson doing their roles again. Mm-hmm. Awesome. That was the piece de resistance to this episode.
Yep. Nice. How about you, Jimmy?
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was great seeing Rom and Leeta again. It's nice seeing Rom in the role as Grand Nagus, because we never got to see that. I mean, we had an idea of how he'd govern, basically a lot like Moogie. Yeah. But Moogie wasn't all sweetness and light. She was a Ferengi. And so it's nice to see, how things are working out. One thing that I wish that they would do, and that I would do if I had the opportunity to write for Star Trek television and involve the Ferengi, is I would have an episode focusing on how horrific Ferengi find progressive tax rates. Where you charge people who are rich a higher percentage because you could have, using Ferengi logic, not only does that disincentivize wealth accumulation, which is what you want, but if you charge poor people less, you incentivize poverty. We need a regressive tax rate. The poor should be motivated to rise in wealth and get out of their poverty by being charged a higher tax rate. How can you humans be so non-compassionate towards the poor in your own society? You need to motivate them to become wealthy.
That would be fun.
That would be good.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I just was to say, I enjoyed it too. I like seeing Rom showing the lobes for business, as Quark would say. Quark always accused him of not having the lobes for business, but Rom clearly and Leeta clearly have the ability to really be leaders of Ferenginar. I do see Moogie's influence where Lower Decks did not try to get away with having naked females on the planet, so that's a nice a progressive addition to the Ferengi culture. Thank you. But I did enjoy the Lower Decks, another Lower Decks look at Ferengi, because of course the Ferengi culture is just perfect for Lower Decks because it is funny at times. I mean, it is a parody already.
It's a parody culture, yeah.
So it is fun.
I love that they poked at, something very serious and very important are, memorials to those who have died during war. But of course, in the Ferengi culture, it wouldn't be that they died, it's that they lost their wealth.
Right.
And
it's
a memorial leaning on it, so much wealth lost.
The memorial to lost profits, I think is what it was. All the bank accounts. Oh yeah, that was amusing. So we start with more Lower Deckers, this time Ferengi. So each time that encounter with that alien ship is a different culture, Lower Deckers. One thing I noticed is the encounter recurs at the time that Lower Deckers are complaining about their captain in each of those encounters. Now, it may be just that Lower Deckers like to complain about their captains, and that's just a coincidence. I don't know if they're making that part of the story, but it's kind of interesting to see. And maybe the difference when it comes to time for the Cerritos to inevitably encounter the ship, that the Lower Deckers won't be complaining about Captain Freeman.
The Lower Deckers also that get destroyed are all talking about how they plan on, at least one of them is talking about how they plan on moving up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be interesting with our Lower Deckers on the Cerritos. They've just been promoted. So they've still got kind of that promotion high of, yeah, we have moved up one step.
Right. So there may be a difference there. Yeah.
In this sequence, so one of the Ferengi Lower Deckers, when the mystery ship shows up, he says something like "right on time," indicating he's in league with it and has some knowledge of the mystery ship. And when they get on the bridge, the captain of the Ferengi ship says he doesn't trust this Lower Decker and knows something is going on with him, and he orders him to be spaced. So it's like take him to the airlock and shove him out. But seemingly at that moment, the mystery ship destroys everybody, including the one that was in league with it. So that Lower Decker might be dead, or they could fudge it and say he got airlocked first. And so we may see him again in the future.
Interesting. I wonder even if these ships are all getting actually destroyed or not, and maybe they're just getting transported or something.
We did see the Romulan ship completely destroyed, where they showed the
wreckage.
The wreckage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But are the people getting beamed up? I mean, it's Star Trek. They can wave a hand at, they've been transported away or something. I'm just curious to see where that's going. So it'll be interesting. I do note that they mentioned before they're destroyed that Grand Nagus Rom has ordered all Ferengi to get out of the arms sales. They're no longer the weapons dealers of the quadrants. So that's interesting, a little bit of progressivism from Rom there. And it's also interesting that they've established that Ferenginar wants to become part of the Federation, which we saw in fourth season Discovery, that the Ferengi are part of the Federation in the 1,000 years in the future or whatever.
And there's been alternate timelines where that's happened as well.
Right. So interesting to see there. The admiral that is sent to I mean, it is incompetence of the highest scale that Starfleet Command has put this particular idiot admiral in charge of these negotiations. Yeah. Were there no ambassadors from Vulcan available or anything? Like why send this admiral? Oh my gosh! But of course, we do it for the comedic opportunity. But I mean, he is just so clear. He thinks it's going to be a cakewalk, and he gets totally goes to the car. He's going to a car dealership and buying a car, thinking he's going to put one over on the salesman, and it goes bad.
And the Peter principle seems to be alive and well in Starfleet. You get the idea you get promoted to your level of incompetence. And because if you look back at even Next Gen or even the original series, the admirals are the incompetent ones.
Yeah.
It's because we've got to make our cast regulars look good. And that means the admirals who come in to give them orders more often than you would expect are going to end up being corrupt or stupid or something.
Yeah. You want the good ones, the good officers, keep them in the captain's chairs. You promote the other guys up.
Yeah. They even promoted Kirk to his level of incompetence and then booted him back down to being a captain.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like politicians. Those who would make good politicians are the ones who don't want the job.
Right. So, speaking of coveted jobs, apparently the most coveted job of all of Starfleet is travel guide duty. Yeah, getting sent to write the travel guide for whatever new planet will become a destination. And so
this is kind of a real thing because, I know, back during World War II and the Korean War and things like that, they would have training films for U.S. servicemen explaining the local culture to them and what to do and not do. And so I assume they have that going on today. And it just makes sense. If you've got troops going into a place, you don't want them causing problems. So give them some education first.
Yeah, we did it when I went to Saudi Arabia. We had to go through some of that kind of stuff where we talked about the cultures. And when I was a job where occasionally I had to go off of the base into actual Riyadh. And we actually had to watch, training videos and things talking about what driving is like in Saudi Arabia, which is basically chaos. So we had to, they actually had a term Saudi sweep of driving in the left-hand lane and, there's my exit. Sounds
like driving in Rome.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes. So our 4 junior officers are being paid to go to all the tourist spots on Ferenginar, and they a big expense account to do so. And Tendi and Rutherford have to pretend to be married. And the comedy in this is that we all know that there's a romantic subtext between these two characters that has been there from the beginning
that they don't want to acknowledge.
Right.
They're pretending it isn't there, and they're sort of put into these situations over and over again where they're kind of forced to confront it in themselves. And that's the comedy in this episode. And it's fun. It's amusing because, I don't know if you guys, but it's kind of nice. They're the nice couple. It would be nice for them to get together. So I think that's cute and fun.
It was fun where they were getting ready to check into the hotel and they're talking about all these things and we be naked in front of each other. Wait, and also they both blush.
They both right. As a married couple. And Mariner is at first interested, and then, as you mentioned, she gets kind of resentful. But she calls Ferenginar is what heaven would be like if God was stupid, which because it's it's like a crazy touristy place where everybody's trying to take advantage of you, and it seems like it's like Vegas, hey, Vegas, it's fun, it's cool. Yeah, but everybody's trying to take your money from you. And as you mentioned, Boimler is doing his usual thing where he says, I'm going to do the impossible and go over the top in fulfilling my mission and visit an impossible number of places. And Ransom, meanwhile, is trying to do a nice thing. It's interesting to see how Ransom has changed this season. Now that they're junior officers, he keeps trying to do nice things for them, and they keep messing it up for themselves. And he's telling Boimler, hey, relax, have fun with this. This you're going to enjoy this. And no.
And so with the best of intentions, Boimler being an intentional overachiever ends up achieving nothing.
Yeah.
He gets into his suite in the hotel. He checks out. He does his suite inspection routine, and in the process, he turns on the television and spends 8 hours watching shows instead of going anywhere.
Yeah.
And the shows he's watching, one of the first things he encounters is a commercial.
Yeah.
Which makes sense since they don't have, in the Federation, they allegedly don't have money anymore, so you wouldn't have commercials to pay for TV shows. But then he watches a TV show about two guys who are cop landlords. So, which is, to my mind, a weird combination, but okay. And then he watches another show called Will They, Won't They, where everyone is secretly in love with everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. 8 hours of sleazy Ferengi TV in the hotel room.
I love the idea of the commercials because, of course, you go back to DS9 and Quark gets commercials into the replicator, including like mugs with his logo on it and stuff like that.
It's a great idea, actually. I mean, if every time someone gets a drink out of the replicator, it's got your logo on it.
Exactly.
It's a great opportunity. I respect that. So, meanwhile, Mariner finds her friend Quimp, and they go to
who is help people remember him. He's the little Ferengi with the monocle that we met in episode 2 of the series.
That goes back,
and it was clear that Mariner really knew him because even back then he was not a casual acquaintance of hers because he was helping her by impersonating a villain in order to help Boimler. And so they already had a well-established relationship, apparently. And so it would make sense if she's on Ferenginar, look him up.
Right. And they go out to hang out, and they go to the Ferengi Public Library, which is a casino, as you'd expect.
Yeah. He says no one's read a book here in 1,000 years. Yeah. Although I understand why they didn't show it to us, but there are lots of Easter eggs in the background as usual, and one of them is Uncle Quark's youth casino. I can only imagine. I probably don't want to imagine what goes on in Uncle Quark's youth casino. Also, we get tons of ads for Sluggo Cola, and we see people drinking Sluggo Cola, which is from Deep Space Nine. Yep. But I didn't see any mentions of Eelwasser, Sluggo Cola's rival. They're the Coke and Pepsi of the Ferengi commerce empire.
Must have ran them out of business.
Yeah, Monopoly, which is the Ferengi goal, I guess. But yeah. And eventually, Tendi and Rutherford end up at Quark's Starfleet Experience Bar and Grill, which it's got to be a reference to the old Vegas attraction, the Star Trek Experience.
It's apparently based on the things that they encounter there are apparently based on things in the Vegas Star Trek Experience.
I mean, it is, which, if for people don't know, there was a casino. I forget which casino it was, but there was a casino that had a whole Star Trek experience. There was a restaurant in there, but there was also like a show you can be part of, like an adventure play. Yeah.
Well, they actually had replicated the Enterprise D bridge.
Right.
And so you could dress up in character and everything and
be part of a story. Yeah. So kind of, I always wanted to go, as a Trekkie, even as cheesy as it would be in Vegas, and sad to say that eventually closed down. But they have to. There was like a shuttlecraft that's the buffet, and like there's all these different elements from DS9 and Star Trek in it, or Starfleet, and they're told they have to spend the dinner truthfully admitting something they find attractive about each other, and there's a lie detector built into their chairs.
And they have to admit something they find attractive about each other with every bite.
Right. Which, it's like designed to mortify two people who are pretending that they don't find each other attractive, but are pretending to find each other attractive. Well, I mean, it's set for
as they're getting ready to admit to their host, their photographer, whatever the guy is, that this really is
their hug-cierge.
Hug-cierge.
that as they're getting ready to admit to him that this is really just kind of a thing to check it out for Starfleet, somebody at another table gets caught that they were actually faking this and get thrown, as you mentioned in the summary, get mentioned into the salt mines or the sulfur mines.
Aquatic sulfur mines.
Yeah.
Which is bad because sulfur and water don't mix, right? That's like is that another element? Magnesium, maybe.
Sodium.
Sodium and water don't mix, right? They're
Sodium, yeah.
Explosive combination. But yes, right. And so they have to dial back until Dr. Migliemo shows up again, who has become the sort of the straight man to a lot of comedy recently, which he works out well for that.
They also tied in historically. His speech has just been littered with food references. And they pay that off here. He tells the Ferengi that his race invented spaceflight to seek out strange new meals.
Yes.
and I love
my own heart.
Yeah. And I love how, last episode, he was, when everyone's emotions were going crazy, he was berating a replicator for serving him food that did not feel like it had been regurgitated. Given that that's how baby birds feed. And in this episode, when after Rutherford and Tendi have to save themselves, they framed him as a homewrecker. The Ferengi offer him a homewrecker package. And he says, "You don't have to throw up in my mouth twice. Let's do it."
That's right. Yeah, because he comes in and almost blows their cover by saying, you're a famously platonic couple.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised.
The closest platonic friends on my ship.
Yes. And then that's when they do the whole, you're trying to break us up, and they create the distraction. So that was fun.
We're divorced now, and they walk off and go back to the ship.
Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, Mariner's subplot is like, why is she acting like this? Why is she getting into bar fights and doing all these things that she ought not do? Which is a continuation from previous episodes. Like this has been an ongoing thing for Mariner, and this
hits it harder than it's been hit before. So I'm sensing a turning point for her is coming.
Right. She's acting out over Ransom treating her with respect, and Quimp calls her for putting on an immature rebellion.
I like before that he as they're going around to these different places, including the library, she's drinking all this stuff, and they call out one of the visual. They did this last episode too with the Beta Z ambassadors, with the yard-long drinks, saying, "I'll take anything as long as it's green and glowing." And because glowing is the standard thing for drinks on lower decks. And in this episode, Quimp turns to Mariner and says, "You can still drink an alarming amount of glowing alien liqueurs."
That's right. So when she first sits down, she tells the guy to bring them a bunch of shots, and then as the waiter walks away, she's like got a shot in her hand. He's like, "Where'd you get that? You didn't even bring that to you."
Yeah. And he's calling out, "That doesn't matter." Chugs it and throws it.
So she's acting out. She apologizes to Quimp, but he does warn her she needs to figure out what's bothering her so much, before it goes bad. So yeah, I think probably next episode or soon, we're going to get a resolution to whatever this is that's bugging her. Meanwhile, Captain Freeman eventually swindles her way out of the bad contract that this admiral's rushing headlong into.
I love how it starts, where Leeta and Rom show up in the ready room or whatever it is, and they've got this enormous gold bust of the admiral. And they say, "We hereby present you with the bust of good fortune." And he takes it, and he's starting to be nice and gracious and accepting it, and the ceremonial invoice for the bust of good fortune. Yeah. So they want him to pay for it now.
It's not a gift.
and then as the negotiations continue, Rom starts to be distracted by the idea of baseball, and everything to him suddenly becomes about baseball. Meanwhile, Leeta is trying to move the negotiations forward. And it's this weird dynamic, and Captain Freeman turns to the Admiral and says, "Admiral, this is a classic dumb cop, reasonable cop routine." Instead of bad cop, good cop. One of them's dumb and one of them's reasonable. Okay, I guess that's a routine in the 24th century.
Well, I like that where she goes, well, we really need to, be able to edit the document to be able to really look at it well. And there's a couple little things we want to change, nothing too serious. And of course, as they go along, it gets worse and worse. And, eventually it's like they, the Ferengi have title to all of Starfleet ships and...
Right. Like this admiral's basically signing away the Federation to Ferenginar. He's given away the farm on this, and he's just as clueless as he's being led down this merry path.
He doesn't want to have to go back to his superiors and say that he blew what should have been a quick sign and go type of negotiation.
Right.
I like Leeta's take on it at the end. Because she's not a Ferengi, she's a Bajoran, and so how does what's her perspective on all of this? Because there were episodes of Deep Space Nine where she would give Rom pushback on Ferengi things that he wanted to do, like about their wedding and stuff like that, and so it's interesting to see how she fits into all this. She gets to be the reasonable cop, the one who's like, let's try to get this business done. Whereas Rom is just fantasizing about baseball. But then at the end, after Captain Freeman has swindled them, she kind of offers a justification or explanation for their approach, which is even though he's Grand Nagus, the Grand Nagus, Rom is Grand Nagus, the Grand Nagus can't just sign with a bunch of suckers and rubes. And so you've shown that you're not suckers and rubes, and thus now we can really negotiate with you.
Well, and
right.
Rom even says, I appreciate you understand our culture. We're always a joke in the quadrant, but you recognize us as, our culture and played within that culture.
And I do like it that Leeta is doing all this not because she's motivated primarily by profit. She's motivated primarily by protecting Rom, and Rom's position, and that's why she's doing all this. Because Leeta, I presume
Rom.
has good, right?
Yeah.
I presume she has good feelings about the Federation, given everything that happened at DS9. But she wants to protect Rom, and so this is how you do it. So I appreciate the good characterization that even in the midst of this funny comedic story, there's good characterization of these characters that we know so well. So I appreciate that. That was good.
Well, it really does even show the intelligence of Rom to let it go the way it did. He was played as a rube, as a dimwit, but he was actually much smarter than Quark would give him credit for. Yeah, and they kind of played into that with this by again letting him pretend to be the dimwit again,
which is something Zek before him did it occasionally. Let people make assumptions and get led astray.
And Moogie was the real brains.
That's right. So nice continuity there. Any other notes on this episode, Father Cory?
No, I did love the baseball part though, especially when he throws the baseball through the display screen and it's just sitting there. You see every time they show it, it's still sitting there. I enjoy that because, of course, Rom got to love baseball through Captain Sisko.
That's right. How about you, Jimmy?
On the Ferengi ship at the beginning, the one that gets destroyed, they're going through, the weapons they're not going to be selling anymore. And one of the things they've got is a revamped Genesis device.
Right.
It's like that's used in terraforming planets and stuff. And it's like, oh, wow. I wonder if they solved the protomatter problem with that.
You fool, you almost activated it.
It's the mini version.
It's the mini version. Oh, man. That's the second time we've recently seen a Genesis device, right? We saw the Genesis device in Picard season 3.
Yep.
So
in terms of you fool, you almost activated it. There's a in Orson Scott Card's Interverse, there's two sort of forks of the novels. One of them is the Ender fork that follows the character Ender Wiggins. The other is the Bean fork that follows a character named Bean. And the Bean fork is actually the better one. But in the Ender fork, as it goes along, the novels become progressively slower in plot. And they have at one point they have this device. It's a planet killer. It's called the MD for matter destructor device or something like that. It's also known as, since it's the MD device, it's called the Little Doctor. And at one point, the Galactic Starways Congress decides one planet needs to be destroyed, where our main characters all are, and they send an MD device or a little doctor to destroy the planet, and it takes like 2 novels to get there. And at the end, our main characters are able to get to the little doctor before it goes off and defuse it. And there's a question of how did you defuse it so rapidly? And it's like, oh, it's written all over the outside how to defuse it. They don't want these things going off accidentally.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I would hope they would do that on the outside of nuclear weapons in real life. By the way, if this starts to go, cut this wire.
Press here. Yeah.
Press here. Press this button. All right. So that's our discussion of Parth Ferengi's Heart Place. Oh, we never mentioned what the title is a reference to. None of us apparently understand the reference, but it refers to the British comedy horror miniseries Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Yeah, don't know that one.
If it means something to you as a listener, let us know what you think about that. But in any case, that is our discussion of that. And we do have feedback. So let me get to that right now. On our recent episode on empathological fallacies, the one titled Pathological Fallacies, Kelly wrote on YouTube, I thought this was an okay episode, but it definitely wasn't my favorite of the season. I immediately deduced that the cause of the problem was going to be T'Lyn because I know how much Lower Decks likes to subvert expectations. You expect that the cause is the Betazoids, so the show wants to subvert those expectations. Your discussion about accents was interesting. I'm from East Tennessee, and I also have a difficult time distinguishing accents of Northerners, while I can distinguish multiple variations of Southern accents. I always find it funny when there's a movie or TV show that features a Southern character. Their accent is usually all over the place. It'll start in one region and end up in another region, sometimes all in the same sentence.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think everybody's good at distinguishing the accents that they grew up with in their own general region. And then it becomes harder to distinguish accents for more distant regions. I have the same thing. I'm not as good at Northern accents as I am at Southern accents in terms of, picking them out and identifying where they're from. I'm a little better at it now than I was because I've done linguistics as a hobby. Mm-hmm. And so that's alerted me to notice certain features that I wouldn't notice originally. But I also know about, inconsistency in accents. In fact, mine is inconsistent right now because I spent 30 years in California suppressing Southern elements in my speech. But now that I'm living back in the Ozarks, I'm letting an accent come out and it'll eventually stabilize. But I know right now, because I've got that California in my head, yeah, it's somewhat inconsistent and variable, but that'll stabilize eventually.
Yeah. It's for people who do accents that aren't their own. I would say, as a general statement, British actors do American accents better than Americans do British accents. I think in general, I have found.
Maybe with some exceptions like Nicola Bryant.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Played Perry on Doctor Who. It's like she's not even doing one American accent. She's all over the place.
Or Benedict Cumberbatch doing a Boston accent. That was quite amusing. That was I have to say about that one.
What was that in?
It was the one about the Bulger brothers, the famously Whitey Bulger, the gangster, and his brother, who was the Senate president of the state legislature, and he played the legislator. And he was doing. I don't remember off the top of my head which Black Mass was it called. I forget exactly. I think the book was called Black Mass, and they called the movie was something else. But in any case, yeah, it was not a good. It was very stereotypical Ted Kennedy as a Bostonian.
Don't get me started on the movie Fargo and Northern accents. I mean, they took a Fargo accent, a Minnesota accent, and really ramped it up. You've just sure, don't you know?
Oh yeah, you betcha. So there was a lot of discussion of accents in our social media and on our Discord, by the way, after that episode. So it was a lot of fun. And then our next feedback comes it comes as a result of our episode discussing In the Cradle of Vexilon. It came from Chris via email, who writes, I begin all of these emails writing this, but it bears repeating. I very much enjoy your podcast and hearing the three of you analyze and react. In fact, it's because of the Secrets of Star Trek that I'm watching Lower Decks in real time versus trying to binge it. There was a recent article with the showrunner encouraging people to watch the show, I think in real time, to help it get renewed. They should on Paramount Plus. They should think about promoting your podcast as a way to do that. Which I humbly am grateful for that suggestion.
Yeah,
we'd love that. We'd be happy to do some kind of work with Lower Decks folks to try to, bring extra attention to them and help them get renewed because they deserve to be renewed.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the best Star Trek shows available, and it should go on indefinitely as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Absolutely agreed.
If Paramount is dumb enough to not renew Lower Decks, which has to be among the cheapest of Star Trek shows to produce because there's no visual effects. I mean, like, the CGI.
Unfortunately, animation has gotten really expensive as well, though, because it is all generated, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But it's a problem across all streaming services because they all came out and they've got all these different streaming services with different packages and different programming and everything. And now people are getting so tired of it that things like Paramount Plus, which really only has Star Trek and the Taylor Sheridan programs, Yellowstone and other programs he's done, that's really the only thing they have that's not available on like cable or something like that.
Right. Yeah, but Star Trek is their bread and butter on Paramount Plus. And if they want to succeed, they better get off their butt and do more. So anyway, Chris continues. 2 quick items. I don't think any of you brought this up in your review of the Cradle of Exelon, but the room Boimler wakes up in after he dies seems to be an homage to the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, when the astronaut, famously Dave, ends up in a similar neoclassical room before evolving into a new life form or whatever happens. Not exactly sure.
So I'd have to go back and rewatch in the Cradle of Exelon to look at the layout of that room again. What I remember is that it had a window, and out the window we could see a black mountain, the Black Mountain. And I also remember that that Boimler was sitting in a chair on the right-hand side of the screen. And all 3 of those factors are different than the room that Dave Bowman is in at the end of A Space of 2001. There are no windows. The room is completely sealed. He's not sitting in a chair, at least not, that's not the most famous part of it. The most famous part is when he's lying in a bed on the left-hand side of the screen rather than the right-hand side of the screen. So I don't know if it's meant to be evocative of that room, but I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah, I just looked up images of it online just real quick, and it doesn't look anything like the room. And I think Jimmy, you had mentioned that it looked more like Picard when it was used.
Yeah.
Picard was talking with Data.
That's I was about to say. Yeah, I think it's more evocative of that than of 2001. But up for interpretation, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then he says, second, have any of you heard of the Nitpicker's Guide to Star Trek? It was a series of books that a guy, Phil Ferrand, wrote in the 90s. I believe there were 4 in total, 3 covering TNG and Classic Trek, and a 4th covering DS9. They're funny and originated with him being annoyed at how inconsistent TNG was with their tapping or not tapping their communicators. He covers some of the same topics that come up in any analysis of Trek. For example, is Starfleet military? And also tracks technical inconsistencies and changed premises from episode to episode. I never got the DS9 book, and it seems to be out of print and very expensive, but the others are available, and I think you'd enjoy them. I don't know what happened to the author or why he didn't continue to write them. And then Chris sent a follow-up email where he said he did find the DS9 book on eBay for a very reasonable price.
I have heard of the Nitpicker's Guide to Star Trek. In fact, I have several of those books, and they are a lot of fun. I even had one, I may still have it, it was effectively a Nitpicker's Guide to the X-Files. So it was kind of the same premise, but it was by a group of guys. And they are a lot of fun, so people can check those out. In terms of, whether or not people touch their communicators, I actually think that that's something that I understand at the time the shows were made why you would want them to touch their communicators. but I actually think you can understand it even if they don't. Because I don't have to touch my Amazon Echo to get it to activate and execute my commands. And even in the series, they can just say computer and start talking to a computer and have it do stuff. So if I'm down on a planet in an away team, and let's say, I mean, even by the 23rd century, let's say Lieutenant Uhura is monitoring the radio station up there, I should be able to just be standing on a planet and say, Lieutenant Uhura, can you tell me what's going on with this? And it should be able to figure out from context that I want to place a call to Lieutenant Uhura, and I wouldn't even need to say, get me Lieutenant Uhura or touch something, or computers should be able to figure that out from context. We're on the verge of that now with abilities to verbally command our home devices.
I'm sorry, I can't perform that action now. Can you do that on your iPhone?
Yeah. Well, and Voyager just got rid of the tapping the comm altogether. They just didn't even bother. They do it every once in a while, but it wasn't necessary.
I did always wonder, like, how did they not accidentally call other people all the time when they were talking about them? Well, I was talking to Chakotay. Did you call me, Captain? No, it was the stupid communicator again.
Well, that's where I assume computer technology has advanced enough they can determine it from context. Is this a communications request or not?
24th century Chat GPT was smart enough to figure that out.
I often wondered, how did it know when they were done communicating? Like, how did it know that I'm done talking to him? I'm talking to the person in front of me now, but
that's just context. Like the doors. That's just like the doors. How does the door know when they're walking towards it that they actually want to go out, or they're going to turn around and talk to the person some more?
Because the stagehand, like right off the side, has the script. Yep. All right. So thank you both for the feedback. It was really appreciated. So we'd like to, at this moment, take time to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including David S., Richard V., Janelle K., Tracy H., and William S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us this time. What did you think of Parth Ferengi's Heart Place? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord, or you can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Lower Decks, A Few Badgies More. Wonder what that means. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and remember the very first rule of acquisition: once you have their money, you never give it back.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
I'll be very disappointed if the next episode isn't Western.
With a bunch of badges. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, wow, it's like what heaven would look like if God was stupid.